Hello everyone and welcome to the Exceed High Performance podcast. I'm Emma Lawson and with me is performance psychologist Dr. Tom Bates. Today Tom and I are joined by Chris Lemons, a commercial deep sea diver. In 2012, a freak failure of the dynamic positioning system of the vessel he was working on resulted in Chris's lifeline to the diving bell being severed. Chris found himself on the bottom of the seabed with only 5 minutes of lifeline remaining. It then took 40 minutes for him to be rescued. Incredibly, Chris was brought back to the ship, resuscitated, and his story has baffled medical experts ever since. This is an opportunity to explore mindset and resilience under extreme pressure.
Chris, it's an absolute delight to have you with us here today. First of all, for everybody listening and tuning into this, what is a saturation diver?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. More to the point, yes, it's a great honour to be here. I suppose that's half the mystery of it, really, is people, I work in this world, people don't even know exists, I guess. But a saturation diver or saturation diving is, in essence, a way of diving very, very deep. It's used principally in the commercial diving world, so mostly in the oil and gas industry, unfortunately. I wish it was for something a bit more noble. But basically when you dive normally, so if you're scuba diving or you dive with air, there are certain limitations to diving very deep for prolonged periods. So they are the effect that the nitrogen in air has on your body. It has a narcotic effect, so it can sort of give you a drunken sensation, which can be quite dangerous and impede decision making. And then the oxygen itself, if you were to breathe the 21% that we're breathing right now, that can lead over prolonged periods, again under pressure, can lead to convulsions and things like that. So there's sort of two of the three problems, and they're solved just by changing the gas. So we breathe a sort of helium-oxygen mixture with maybe as little as 5 or 6% oxygen in it, which would sort of probably lend us to be hypoxic pretty quickly right now, or kill us quite quickly. But because of the miracle of pressure, that's the equivalent to breathing nearly 5 times as much oxygen as we're breathing now. The third and the main problem, really, of diving deep on air is the decompression required. So you're probably aware when you go scuba diving, because you absorb that nitrogen, that inert gas, the longer you stay down and the deeper you go, the more of that nitrogen you absorb into the tissues of your body. And if you're to ascend directly to the surface, those bubbles of gas that have sort of been absorbed into your tissues and your bloodstream will expand very rapidly, and they'll cause tissue to rupture, they'll cause veins and arteries to block and things like that. So that's the bends you've probably heard of, and decompression sickness. If we're to dive, so when we're working out in a commercial capacity out in the North Sea, for example, you might be diving down to 100 metres, so sort of 300 feet, and we work for 6 hours a day on the seabed, so quite a long time. So that decompression, if you wanted to swim back to the surface in a controlled fashion, would take 4 days from that position. So obviously you can't do that on a day-to-day basis. People are going to get tired and hungry hanging on ropes and so on. So what we basically do as saturation divers, instead of going through it that way, we on day one of any particular project, we go into a set of chambers, so the steel tubes basically, which exist on a vessel or on a ship or an oil installation perhaps, and you're pressurized down. So once you're in there, that helium oxygen mixture that I just talked about is pumped into those chambers to pressurize that system down to an equivalent working depth. So if you're going to be working at 100 meters, it might be pressurized down to 90 meters. That takes about an hour or so. And then once you're there, you live, breathe, sleep under those conditions. And then every day you just commute down to the seabed in a diving bell, which is also pressurized. You sort of climb from one to the other and you're lowered down through a hole in the ship. And then when you get to that 90 meters and you open the door, because you've got an equivalence of pressure inside and out, the water doesn't come in. So you can then sort of don your diving gear, drop down to the seabed, work for 6 hours, come back to the diving bell, be hauled back up to the ship after that. Sorry, this is a bit complicated.
No, it's fine. I just want to ask you one question right here whilst we're here, because I've now got about 25 questions. I don't know about Emma.
Interrupt me,
but I'm so curious about this. So what on earth? How did you get into it? What made you want to do it in the first place?
Nothing really. I don't think it's something you would want to do.
Because it sounds bloody awful.
Well, it is because what I'm talking about there really is you just do one dive and you decompress very slowly at the end. But we keep diving day after day, living in that chamber for nearly a month at a time. So you spend 24 days diving, and then you do that 4 days of decompressing very slowly at the end. So yeah, it's a long-winded way of doing one dive, really. But yeah, in terms of getting into it, I fell into it really. I was in my just sort of 19, 20, a little bit lost, I think, in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. And a friend very kindly got me a job working on the back deck of one of these vessels, because I was very much like you are, perhaps. I had no really real idea of that it existed, and certainly what it entailed. But that allowed me to see it all happening firsthand. I used to deliver tools and things down to the divers, and yeah, they seemed enigmatic. They sort of locked away in these chambers for a month at a time, so you don't get to see them. And I've learnt much better since, but it looked quite glamorous and interesting, and not a 9 to 5, I suppose. And yeah, they probably turned up with better cars than me on the quayside as well, which helped. So yeah, that was great. For me, it was a sort of seminal moment in life, because it gave me direction. And after that, it's much easier to pursue your goals in life when you know what they are, isn't it? Yeah.
How long did it take to train to become fully qualified, and what was the process like? Because I'm fascinated to speak to you today about the mental and emotional processes, skills, characteristics, qualities required to be able to, in a sense, perform under a certain type of pressure. Pressure in the sense of mental and emotional type pressure.
And literal in this example, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it's quite a long process. Much of it is, there's a certain degree of training, sort of proceduralized training courses. They take something like about 4 months, I think, in the UK. Over in the US, they take a year to do that kind of process. So it depends where you are. But we take a bit less time in this country, because most of the job, I think, is learnt on the job. It really is the kind of thing. You can learn how to dive, but the truth is, I could probably teach you how to dive commercially in half an hour. Really, it's not complicated to stick a hat on your head and breathe underwater. Really, the skill set involves the working, the ability to perform in that environment, really, and that's something that takes many years. So you sort of do an apprenticeship as an air diver, we call them, which means you're limited to 50 meters. So I did that for maybe 7 years, I think, 7 or 8 years, and then after that time, you've learned not just the skill set, but I guess coming to start to what you're talking about really is that people get the chance to assess you and your ability to deal with pressure, to perform in that environment, because it is, not just literally a high pressure environment, but it's also a place where there's quite big money involved in terms of, the vessel some of the vessels we work on cost, £300,000 or £400,000 a day to run. And then there's the pressure of an oil pipeline, which might not be functioning, and an oil company losing millions of pounds a day. So suddenly you're the pair of hounds on the bottom sorting that out. So there's a sort of a degree of pressure to that as well. So there's a lot of trust involved, and to become a saturation diver, people need to know that you're going to be able to, first of all, deal with the pressures of living in that environment for a month at a time, because once you're locked in, there's no real escape. Your mother dies, your appendix bursts, you're terrible at the job. You're not coming out for 4 days, and if you do, it's a very expensive mistake by your employers as well. So that all needs to be addressed. So yeah, it's a long sort of gradual process, both for you in terms of learning the skill set and learning whether you've got the resilience, I guess, and composure to be able to do that job, but also for the people ultimately giving you that chance to be able to assess you.
Did you find? Sorry, I'm going to ask a question in a second. I promised that I wouldn't steal this one, but I'm just so passionately curious about it. I can't help myself. I mean, a couple of things. So when you say you're living down there for a month at a time, just describe to us, the working conditions that you're in. So I'm assuming most of the time it's very, very dark under the water. And then secondly to that, did you feel like your emotional capacity grew to be able to cope with the conditions that you were in every single day? Or did it just come naturally to you? Did you just feel you had the skill set psychologically to be able to just thrive in that type of environment?
I'm not sure thrive is the right word. It's you endure, I guess. You have to learn a resilience to be able to cope with that. I think that it's a bit of both really. There are two aspects to the job. There's the working part of the job where you have some of those pressures I've described, but I would say equally, and if not more difficult, is the living aspect of the job, because you don't live down under the water. You live on a ship, but you're in very, very close confines for a month at a time. I mean, literally, we're talking about something that's 2 meters high and 2 meters wide. I have to sleep sort of within less than touching distance of 6 other men. So that's a very pressurized situation to be in. You're on camera all the time, all that kind of thing. So, I would say, like a lot of things, I suspect you don't really know until you get there. I think it's definitely something you learn. You may have some of that within you, I guess. I'm sure there were people you'd be the same. You'd say you'd be suitable for this. You wouldn't. But when you really drill down to it, from experience, I found that from personal experience, you don't know. You tell everybody you're going to manage, you'll be fine. But in your heart, you don't think you do until somebody shuts that door on the first day, or the first day you get dropped down, 200 meters below the water into the pitch black, dark and cold. And I've seen pretty hardened men, I guess, because unfortunately it is almost all men, but, ex-military types, people do come from all sorts of backgrounds, socio-economic backgrounds, all kind of thing. But yeah, generally you get a lot of that kind of thing. And people you think, that's a tough guy. He gets in there, he's been a diver, might well have been a diver for many years, suddenly locked in those environs, drop down, opens a door and just says, I can't do it, and that the sort of the penny just drops that it's not for him. So it's, I think it's hard to know until you really get in there. But there's no doubt about it that it's something that gets easier over time. You learn, first of all, how resilient you are as a human being, I think. A lot of that, for me personally, involves relativizing it. It can seem like a big deal. It can seem daunting. And then when you get in the thick of it and you get used to it, like a lot of things, isn't it? You realise, actually, it's not that bad. I can cope with this, And the other thing is the suffering of others, which I always joke about, but it's true, isn't it? We sort of take solace in the suffering of other people. And what I found in that particular place is that, as I described, there's usually 6 of you living in one of these chambers, 6 people who in a lot of other walks of life you might cross the street to avoid, or, they wouldn't necessarily be your friends, or you might be intimidated by. But it's a great, great leveler to be in there. You're on camera all the time. You can hear every single phone conversation that everybody else makes. What I'm trying to describe is a place where you can't hide. So that ego, that front that we all have as human beings generally, that we present to the world and we all know deep down probably isn't quite us. There's no way, I don't think, of maintaining that in there. You get to see people's fears, you get to see how their sensitive side, and you get to see that they're as afraid or as anxious about what you're doing as you are. And that's comforting, really, to know that, well, it's not just me. It's not that I'm enjoying their suffering, but it's that you think, well, maybe it's...
I'm not alone in mine.
Exactly. And that's comforting. And so all these things over time teach you that, resilience can definitely be learned, I think, to some extent, to answer your question in a very long-winded way.
No, fantastic.
I'm super interested because you talked about the sort of technical, tactical, mental preparation that you did as an individual. But obviously, as you say, you're then thrust underwater, working in very close confines with another group of men. Did you, as a team, have to train together to become a cohesive unit in advance of diving, or are you literally sort of thrust together with a team, on a particular mission?
Yeah, completely the latter. Certainly initially, it's every sort of rotation, you work there for a month and you come back for another month, and every rotation you'll probably be in. We always work in teams of 3, so you'll almost always be in with 2 new people. So you may know them, you may have worked with them in the past, you may have never met them until the day you go into the sort of the chamber. So but that's sort of individuals as a unit and as a sort of profession, I guess, is that you do know that you all had similar experiences, and you have all trained doing the same things, and you've all gone through the same processes, the same training. And you trust, I suppose, that they're there for a reason. And also there's a much wider team that you have worked with regularly, and you trust their judgment on things. But that said, it doesn't take long when you're in there 24 hours a day, working under the water 6-8 hours every single day to get to know people quite intimately, both personally and professionally. So you'll regularly be working with people who you know better than your own family as well, I suppose. So there's a bit of both, really, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. So take us to 2012 and the incident. It'd be great if you could just sort of bring to life what were the events that kind of led up to that, and ultimately kind of what happened.
Incident's probably the best way to describe it. It was indeed 2012, which is sort of 13 years ago. It's quite a while ago now. But Well, for us, it was there were 3 of us in the water that day, and it really was a pretty normal day at the office, I guess, as much as it ever can be in that working environment. We were working out in the middle of the North Sea, about 90 miles east of Aberdeen, and we were 91 meters down, I think, that night. So it's about 275 feet in old money. And my colleague Dave Uassa and I, we work in a team of 3. One of us always stays in the diving bell every day. Dave Uassa and I were working inside an oil structure, basically. Most of the infrastructure in the oil and gas world is not, people always imagine it's oil rigs, but it's not.
Yeah.
Most of it's on the seabed, pipelines, wellheads, electronics, hydraulics, all the things you need to get everything, the oil and gas back to the mainland. And we were working inside a structure the size of a house, so it was about 10 meters high, maybe 20 meters long, just removing a section of pipework, really, the kind of thing we do every single day, really. We had a fairly rough weather that night. It wasn't the cause of the incident, but it definitely exacerbated what happened. And basically, in order for us to function on the seabed, because we are attached to the vessel, the boat, and then to the diving bell, each individual diver is attached by what we call an umbilical, and that really is what it sounds like. It's a giver of life, really. It provides you with an essentially infinite supply of breathing gas, just pumped down from the boat, hot water to keep you warm in what's obviously a very cold environment, and then power as well for a sort of a hat and a light and a camera on your hat. So in order that you don't get dragged around the seabed by that, it's essential that the vessel stay in one place. So it has a computer system which basically has various sensors, GPS, all sorts of other stuff, really, just to hold it in one geographical location. And to cut a very long story short, that computer system failed that night catastrophically. There were multiple backups; they all failed in the same instance. And in 35 knot winds, this sort of 10,000 ton vessel suddenly started to drift away from where Dave and I were. And as it did so, it begins to drag us. We weren't really aware of this. We heard some alarms going off. We have an open line of communication up to the vessel. And we were told by our dive supervisor, Craig Frederick, who's a Canadian, really just to make our way back to the diving bell, because in that place, that really is the only safe haven. You can't go to the surface. You die from explosive decompression straight away. So there's only one safe place. That's the diving bell. And it's quite easy to find because you just follow your umbilical. You're attached to it. So we really came out of the structure we were working in, started to climb our umbilicals to get back to the diving bell. And mine...
Is that a process that you train for? Emergency procedures? Did you hit some kind of default button there where you confident in reverting back to your training? Or did you have to completely respond in the moment?
No, 100%. That's all training. Yeah, I mean, it's. I would say a lot of the things I'm about to describe really happen automatically, autonomously, because we do rehearse that kind of situation all of the time, almost daily. A massively proceduralized workplace, and because of the sort of the inherent dangers of where you are, we're very, very safety conscious, obviously, and drills a repetition play an enormous part in that. So the rescue of a diver we'll come to in a bit, but yeah, everything like that, umbilical management, which is making sure that your umbilical doesn't catch on anything, hearing of alarms, things like that. Yeah, we're very, very well versed in that. There wasn't much thinking required, and I often describe that when I'm talking about the night, really, is I didn't do much thinking, I don't think, until I realised I couldn't help myself, really. But yeah, most of it was just automatic. You automatically know to get back to the diving bell, not to think too much, not to ask too many questions and clutter the airways with chatter and things like that. So yeah, mostly automatic, I would say. And the issue I had really was we didn't really know what was going on. So when I climbed to the top of the structure on my umbilical, I'd left a bit of a loop behind. And it caught on a metal outcrop, basically, and very, very abruptly, very, very quickly, I'd become an anchor to a 10,000 ton vessel, and there's only ever going to be one winner in that situation, obviously. The vessel sort of continued to drift away in an uncontrolled fashion, but now my umbilical is caught through a gap that's about an inch wide. It's continuing to slip around that gap, and it was sort of pulling me down into the structure, and I can remember my legs were splaying. I was thinking, they're going to break, and this is going to be painful. And then secondly, I thought if that continues to slip through that gap, there's nothing I'll be able to do to stop it, and I'll be I'll be pulled through an inch gap as well. And, a bit like being pulled through a cheese grater, that's not going to be a very pleasant way to go either, obviously. Thankfully, though, that the umbilical stopped slipping, ironically. But that then means as the boat moves away, massive tension starts to come onto it. Initially, I lose my communication cable. I think must have snapped inside, and suddenly I couldn't speak to anyone. They couldn't hear me. Obviously, I'm begging them to give me some slack, and they couldn't do that. And then I lost my breathing gas. I think the hose must have kinked to the point where the breathing gas couldn't pass down it. So at that point, what we do carry are emergency tanks, basically, on our backs, which are a couple of scuba bottles. And trust me, when you've got nothing to breathe, it's quite a quick process. But you open, again, automatic, something you've drilled lots and lots of times. You have a knob on the side of your helmet which you can open to open the flow of gas from those emergency tanks. Now, that's great, but that puts you in a very, very different world, a different place, because you've gone from a world where you have this infinite supply of gas to one where you have a very finite one. And now in this case, if you've seen a documentary, they make a big deal of 5 minutes. I think the reality is probably like about 9 minutes. We'll never really know is the truth, but not much at all in that place to be able to save yourself. Boat continues to move away, tension continues to come on, and eventually and inevitably the umbilical snaps like a shotgun.
And you heard that. You felt it, you heard it?
I don't remember strangely hearing it, Dave, who's in the water with me, he'd sort of turned to try and help me. We had this little moment when we were eye to eye. They've made a Hollywood movie of it. It's just come out in February, and there's a lot of screaming about, I will come back for you. But that didn't happen. We couldn't actually speak to each other. But we definitely had an eyeball-to-eyeball moment where I'm looking at him saying, help me out here, please. And he looked at me and said, I can't, I'm sorry, because he was being pulled backwards himself.
Wow.
He couldn't reach me. But he describes the umbilical breaking as like a shotgun going off, a very violent, noisy affair. But I don't really have a memory of that. Because the tension's released at that point, I sort of fell the 10 meters back to the seabed from the top of this house-sized structure I'd been on, and landed like a bit of an upturned turtle, really. And I can remember being just bewildered, really, not really having processed, I don't think, what had happened. But you're definitely just in automatic mode at that point. That is just fight or flight. There is only one safe place. That is the diving bell. Must get back there. That seemed to be up to me. I must get up, back up to the top of that structure, and at the very least make myself easy to find.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely pitch black dark. I just remember putting my hand in front of my face, my sort of faceplate of my helmet, and not being able to see the shadow of my hand in front of my face, the most complete darkness. So that's
Is it clear which way is up, or
not even in that situation? I mean, you sort of watch your bubble sometimes, that tells you which way you're going. But I was on the seabed there, so that does help. You know which way's up then. But I didn't know which way the way to walk. That was the thing. It's very easy to get lost down there at the best of times. With a light and a compass and somebody telling you where to go, you can still make a fool of yourself quite easily. But I sort of got to my feet, and a bit like going to the toilet in the middle of the night, I sort of put my hands out in front of me and took a couple of hopeful steps, really, and very fortunately bumped in straight into this enormous thing, which is painted bright yellow, but I still couldn't see it. So that was very lucky. If I'd gone the other way, how much of that was instinct or how I fell, I don't know. But had I gone the other way, it would have rendered A, finding me, and B, rescuing me infinitely more difficult. But I did find it, and then I sort of managed to find a way to climb to the top of this structure. And I remember getting to the top, and that really being a seminal moment when I think I've said seminal about 4 times now, haven't I? But anyway, it was a big moment, I remember, because I remember looking up and for some reason fully expecting to see the diving bell right in front of me. The lights on, Dave on his way to get me. Everything was going to be okay, like it always is, isn't it, in life? Just about. But there was nothing. There wasn't, I remember there not being even a speck of light in the sea above me. And that's really when it transitioned from being what felt like a frightening, panicky situation, but one in which, as you described, Tom, your automatic processes kick in, to one where I realised this was very, very likely to be life-threatening, because I thought even if Dave's right in front of me, ready to drag me back to the diving bell, because I had no buoyancy, I couldn't swim at that point, it had all been severed along with my umbilical. So even if I'd seen it, there wasn't much I could do with myself. And I knew that even with Dave there, the margin between running out of the emergency gas and getting me back to a breathable environment were already very slim. But with nobody there, I thought, well, the chances of me getting out of this are now almost non-existent, really.
And where had the diving bell gone? Had the ship dragged it with it as it drifted?
Yeah, so the diving bell basically hangs directly under the ship on a wire. So as the ship goes away, so does the diving bell, and they'd lost control of it, basically. They were trying to wrestle back control with it manually, but it ended up nearly, I think they were 250 metres, 270 metres away from where I was, so miles away, completely unable to help me. I couldn't hear them, couldn't see them. And they were gone for, as it turns out, nearly 40 minutes before they were able to regain control of the vessel and bring it back to my position, yeah.
And at that point, so you were on top of the structure, and then what, kind of conscious that you're there on your own. Did you then go back to the seabed? Like, what happened then?
Well, it was, as I described, massively dark.
Yeah.
I was initially concerned with the current and everything that I would fall off it and not be able to find it again. So I remember crawling almost hand over hand on the grating on the top, really just to find a position that I wasn't going to fall off, and try and be as central as possible in it. But no, I realised very, very quickly that I was powerless to do anything about this. I didn't have any options at all. I was completely at the mercy of the team above me and their ability to come back and effect a rescue, really. So that, strangely, that was kind of calming. I mean, I'll never to this day pretend that I was anything other than scared. I defy anyone to be otherwise in that situation, panicking, breathing hard. But there was definitely a point when I tried to regulate my breathing just to make the gas that I did have left last as long as possible. But it almost happened automatically. I remember the fear almost physically draining out of me.
Yeah.
It was very calming. I think my breathing rate really slowed. I suspect I would have been very, very cold at that point as well, which probably did that as well. But yeah, I realised quite quickly that I could do nothing. And so I almost regressed back to where it all began and assumed the fetal position.
Yeah.
If I could have put my thumb in my mouth, I would have done, but I couldn't quite. I really just, I could do nothing at that point but other than crane my neck and hope for rescue that didn't seem to be coming, yeah.
And with time running out, you're in the fetal position. Are you aware of how many minutes of gas and oxygen you have left in your emergency supply?
No. Yes and no. I mean, I had roughly done, my maths isn't great at the best of the times, but I remember thinking I've probably had 8 or 9 minutes of gas in my tank. I probably used 5 minutes of it, breathing hard, panicking, getting back to that position. But it seemed to last a lot longer than I thought it would. Now, whether that's because it did or whether my sense of time is probably skewed, I suspect, with the cold and everything like that. So we do have a gauge which normally tells us how much gas you have left. But I think, but it was so dark I couldn't see that, which I think in itself was probably helpful because I think that would have been panic-inducing to watch that needle drop down to the point where you thought, well, I'm going to die when it hit zero. So that was almost a good thing. So no, I don't know. We don't really have the evidence of how long it lasted. That's the thing. So the maths, such as it is, says 9 minutes. That really depends on your physiology, the conditions, how hard you're breathing and working. It's pretty speculative. So it's quite possible that it lasted maybe longer than that, maybe as much as 15. We think it would have been possible, but we do know at some point, because eventually, whilst the boat couldn't get back to me with the diving bell, they had what's called a remotely operated vehicle, which is a flying camera really, and that had a very long tether. So that was able to get back to me long before the ship was. And before we started recording, you were talking about the documentary and that sort of harrowing footage, and that's filmed by that remotely operated vehicle. So they're able to get back to me, and that at that point I think 21 minutes have passed, something like that. Maybe 19 minutes, but at that point I am definitely unconscious. You can see when they find me that I'm lying there, I'm twitching in a very unusual, uncontrolled fashion, but I've definitely gone by then. So I don't know how long it lasted.
Twitching, really. And when you say I'd gone, you mean lost consciousness? Yeah. But the body was presumably in shutdown mode, survival mode, twitching. What is that twitching?
Well, we're not sure. So I talked briefly about the oxygen and the damage that can do, that sort of oxygen toxicity it's called, and that can cause convulsions. So some people have speculated it was that. Some people think I'm saying hello to the camera. It's definitely not that. It's definitely not waving. I think personally it was probably what they call hypercapnic poisoning. So as I ran out of gas, the amount of sort of O2 and breathing gas in my helmet would have reduced, and that would have been replaced by the CO2, the carbon dioxide that I'm breathing out. I think that I would have ended up breathing that back in and absorbing it. So I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about. I don't. I've been told this by better qualified people than me. But yeah, apparently that's quite a common, particularly the way it sort of spasming. If you see the footage, that apparently is quite indicative of what they call hypercapnic poisoning, which makes sense. And also to come to what happens later, which is obviously that I'm still here. I don't think I need. That's not a spoiler. I don't think to say that.
Not at this point.
Yeah. And also without, or at least no one's brave enough to say otherwise, without any brain damage. That can be neurologically protective. Apparently, that build up of carbon dioxide. So I think it's that. But so much, as with so much of this, we're really just guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk about, the heroes of the story a little bit being your colleagues, and, you also talked about the kind of technical, tactical preparation you do for incidents like this. So, did they kick in again to that automatic sort of rescue mode, or was that actually quite unprecedented? What happened?
Well, it was both, I would say. You make a very valid point, which is it's often me talking to people about this incident.
Yeah.
But the reality is I really am just the damsel in distress in this story, the lucky boy, really. The real heroes, I'm sure they wouldn't want to be called that. But if there are heroes in this story, it's definitely the other two in the water, and everybody, 100 people up on the boat that day, nearly all coming together to effect what turned out to be a successful rescue. So I would say there was enormous amount of what they had to do that night was absolutely automatic because of the things you're talking about, Tom. The fact that it is so well drilled, and that's not just the people in the water, that's the people on the boat, that's the chain of command which kicked in. People knew where to go, what to do. The bridge team came together to try and tackle the various issues they were facing. In dive control similarly. So a huge amount of that was very controlled. Really took place with very, very little thought, I would say. What's really remarkable I've been lucky enough to listen to the audio footage from the bridge and dive control that night, and what's really noticeable is just how calm everybody is. There's a real sense of, I wouldn't say peace, but it's not, no one's shouting, no one's screaming. You see that in really exceptional sort of military environments as well, don't you? The same kind of thing, that sort of total calm in what must have been an incredibly pressurized, unprecedented situation. So, loads of it was absolutely automatic. But what I will say is that the fact that they were so drilled, and so much of that did come automatically, meant that the unprecedented side of things, because absolutely there were elements of this incident we had never considered. We'd never considered anybody breaking their umbilical. We had never considered the complete failure of that system. It technically wasn't supposed to be possible. So we hadn't really risk assessed or mitigated or put procedures in place for that. There were loads of other little things which cropped up that night. They talked about the remotely operated vehicle picking me up with an arm and bringing me back. Again, no procedures for that. So when I am lucky enough to tell people this story, what I impress is the fact that people were so drilled, and so much of what was a very difficult came, I'm not going to say came easy to them, but it came automatically to them, as you say, Tom. Gave them the headspace, gave them the freedom, I think, to tackle the unprecedented issues. Because so much of the things that happened took care of themselves. Of itself, if you like.
And Chris, who found you? How did you get rescued?
So eventually they managed to reset that computer system. They had an idea where I was. That remotely operated vehicle had found me on top of the structure, so they had a visual on me for nearly 40 minutes before they were able to get back to me. So they sort of watch, and nearly 100 people on the boat, because it's all beamed to cameras all around the ship, sat there and watched me twitching for maybe 5 minutes, and then I stopped twitching, and I lie there completely motionless for nearly well over half an hour after that. So for them, they'd really had long since, I think, I'm not to say they didn't have hope, I'm pretty sure they did, but they would been well within their rights to assume I'd died, and they were just coming back to fetch the body, really. But the computer system was reset they're a Norwegian crew, and they call this the Swedish solution. And I don't think it's a compliment, but it's one we're all familiar with. And they just turn the computer off and they turn it back on again. There's a long story as to why they hadn't done that earlier, but yeah, we all know how that goes. But yeah, thankfully that reset the system, and then the boat is able to move back to me in a sort of controlled fashion. And Dave, who was in the water with me, Dave Yoassa, he hadn't been able to reach me because his umbilical itself is only 50 meters long, so he's restricted. He couldn't reach me. Eventually they get close enough to me and he's able to drop down and drag me back, which was, an absolutely remarkable effort. I'm sort of 6'5" and, I weighed quite a little bit more then as well. You've got masses of diving equipment. I had no buoyancy. You've got a diving bell, and therefore, he's being pulled up and down nearly 5 or 6 meters in very rough weather that night in the middle of the North Sea. He sort of put a bit of a gas hose up we wear a neck dam, like a latex neck dam around our necks. So he put a sort of gas hose up there to try and give me a bit of a supply, and then hooks himself onto me and drags me back, basically, which, again, the remarkable thing about all of this is we have it all on camera, and that's a lot of the reason the documentary got made, and all the protagonists still alive, I guess, as well. But it's remarkable to watch him do that, being pulled up and down. He's a supremely fit guy. He's got one of these sort of rock climber physiques, he's quite lithe and wiry, but really strong and fit. I don't know that many people would have managed, to be totally honest with you. So obviously unbelievably grateful to him for having done that. But he said himself, if he'd not sort of got me onto the little stage we have under the diving bell on his last effort, he was ready to have to let me go and drop me and start all over again, really. So these small fine margins are what the reason I'm here today.
And do you remember that incredible moment when you were then resuscitated? Do you have a recollection of then what was, the kind of thought then, the sort of feelings that kind of came back? Do you remember that or not?
Very little. And certainly not in the first instance. I feel like I've got a very lucid memory of everything up until the point of falling unconscious. So there was sort of a period of, we'll never know, let's say 5, 6, 7 minutes of a lot of contemplation of waiting to die, I guess. But so I've got a very lucid memory of all of that. But the moment of being resuscitated, not as much. I remember sort of flashing lights, I suppose. Apparently I climbed back into the diving bell myself after a couple of minutes. I was absolutely bright blue. The first thing I can remember really is being sat in my chair in the diving bell. Apparently I started to take all my gear off, like nothing had happened. And I can remember seeing Dave. Dave had then got in. He's exhausted, crumpled really on the other side of the bell. I remember looking across thinking, what's wrong with him? What's he moaning about? Weird memories. But I think you can see in the footage that I after a few minutes, I sort of reach up and over and I grab their hands, give them a bit of a squeeze. So I must have realised something had happened then, but I don't really remember much. I think all my memories came back to me maybe an hour or so later. I don't remember much in that first hour at all. I mean, I would have been, pretty much hypothermically cold and not quite myself, I guess. We're not going to say oxygen deprived, but certainly, breathing gas deprived at that point. So it probably took a little bit of time. Yeah. And the truth is, maybe we'll come to it in a second, but it took years really to realise the magnitude of what had happened. I was very blasé about it at the start. It didn't seem that big a deal, strangely.
No.
Did you after the incident? Did you continue working?
We did. We were closed down for 3 weeks by the health and safety executive here in the UK for obvious reasons. But they gave us the choice to, when I say us, I mean the three of us in the water that day to go back and be the first ones back in the water, which is exactly what we did. I'll be very clear, that was not through any kind of bravery or anything like that. The truth is I felt, and still to this day feels, largely disassociated, I think, from what happened. I watched the footage back and I think, same as everyone else, does he make it? But also there's that sense of wanting to get back on the bike, you think, if I don't do it now, will I ever do it? But ultimately we were fine. We'd almost come through that, I hesitate to call it a trauma, but certainly that incident with more confidence in many ways about what we did and what we do. It was almost it built resilience and it built confidence, I would say. So it wasn't a struggle or difficult to go back. I say that, and yet I don't know if I would make that decision today.
Because?
I was 32 then. I was also in the infancy of that. I'd been a diver for quite a long time then, but I'd only been doing saturation diving for about a year. And it's really, you feel like you spent your whole life getting to do that. And I didn't want to throw that away. And my main concern was that I was going to lose my job, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, different now. I've got 2 kids, a bit older, a bit wiser, a bit more mindful and thoughtful of other people's feelings as well. I think, it's quite easy in some ways, isn't it, to go back and throw yourself back in danger. I mean, I know you might be talking to soldiers and things in this series as well, and be interesting to see what they think, because there is a choice in that, isn't there, of putting yourself in harm's way to some extent.
Yeah.
I feel it's quite controlled and mitigated, but obviously this story suggests otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know. For us, because you can affect the outcome. You're there, you're laughing and joking, and you just get on with it. And it was honestly fine. But I'm sure for anybody I'm lucky enough to have love me at home, that was a very difficult thing. And I was a bit naive, a bit selfish, I guess, in that. So I don't know if I'd be quite the same today. Yeah.
How's your life evolved or changed?
Yeah,
experience.
It hasn't. I mean, people always assume you've had some kind of epiphany, I think, from having gone through this sort of near death thing. But that's definitely not the case. Life, I found, has this habit of taking over very quickly, normalising it. And, I get no sympathy at work. They're the last people to sort of say, oh, you're okay. It's, you still got to take the bins out on a Tuesday, go and buy a pint of milk. Life sort of has a habit of moving on. And I think in some ways I try and relativise what happened as well. I often think we all have near misses, don't we? We walk in front of a car, you think, well, that was close, and really that's all that happened to me. It was just the context and this slightly alien world that I work in that makes it maybe a bit more of a story. But I think I definitely have a more acute awareness of death. I think about death a little bit more. More, the fragility of life, I guess, the finality or the pretty finite nature of our existence on Earth. But I guess we all think about that, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
In our quiet moments, we all think, one day I'm going to die, and maybe it's just a little bit heightened for me. But the truth is, and it's not because I'm remarkable in any way. I think we all have this capacity to be resilient and I'm not saying put it in a box, because I don't think I repressed or buried it, but you really can shy it away, take the positives from it and move on, really. And that has been a fairly easy process for me. I don't know if that would be the case for everyone. I don't know that, but I think it's amazing what we can endure.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned that there's a Netflix documentary, The Last Breath. There's also a film, and I know that you regularly speak at conferences and events, ready to kind of share your learnings. I'm just interested to know, was it a conscious choice that you made to tell the story in order to maybe make sense of it?
That's a good question. Yeah. They've just had a Hollywood film come out this year, which is called Last Breath as well. They've got zero imagination. It wasn't initially, no. In terms of telling a story, we talked at the beginning about sort of decompression. And so even after the incident, we had 4 days locked away in those chambers.
Yeah.
And we talked it to death, obviously. Yeah. We talked, well, not literally to death, but we talked about it a great deal. And I think almost that was extraordinarily cathartic. And I think at the point when we got out of there, we'd almost moved by it at that point. But the sort of speaking sort of was thrown on me, really. I got invited to speak at a few events and tell the story, and you definitely quite enjoyed the process of doing that. And it's lovely. It's a story, particularly when you sort of tell it in a longer format, I guess, that people, I'm not going to enthralled, might be giving it a bit of a bumming it up too much, but they're definitely invested in it and interested in it, because not just because of the story, because as you said, it's a world that people don't know too much about. So that's been a really rewarding thing over the years, and it's become a very positive thing in my life. And to the point where this year, as you mentioned, I stopped diving about 4 years ago to become a supervisor in the same world, if you like. But I've taken a bit of a sabbatical this year to speak full time, and it's been it's just great. It's lovely. It's always so well received, and it's just a story that I think has so many facets to it that it doesn't have to be applied to the oil and gas world. I speak at accountancy companies and zip companies and whoever will have me, really. But I think there's so many lessons around teamwork and resilience and being prepared and being drilled and procedures and checklists and all these sort of things, as well as the very, very basics of us as human being and death and surviving and things like that as well. So it's been a lovely thing for me since.
Chris, it is simply a remarkable story. Ever since Emma let me know that we were privileged enough to have you as a guest, I've been deeply curious about the whole entire process. And part of the reason why Emma and I are doing this is to allow our guests to share wisdom, concepts, key lessons, messages with the world, really. So I think it would be a really nice way to come to a close in this interview with, is there anything that you'd like to highlight and share with the audience?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much wisdom I've imparted, but thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah. There are so many things to this, but I think the key thing for me through all of this is that we're all human beings at the end of the day, obviously, and the sort of the happy ending in this story is that somebody got good to go home to their loved ones. And for me, it was driven. It might sound a little bit trite, but a lot of it was just driven by love, really, and the love we have for other human beings. You know, in that this seemed like a hopeless situation, and it must have seemed like a hopeless situation to everybody on board. And I will tell you right now, I'd basically given up. I didn't think I was going to make it out of this, and yet the strength of character and the love that people on board showed for each other and for themselves, because it would have been extraordinarily damaging personally and professionally for all of them to have had this sort of death on their copybook, if you like. But they showed in coming back to get me has bowled me over ever since. And that and just how incredibly resilient we all are as human beings. You know, I think the most important thing to point out is I am not a special one in any way. I'm a very average human being in every other department. Trust me on that one. You know, and yet you're capable of surviving these things, as you know, we probably all are. You know, so we're tougher than we think. Yeah, I would definitely leave you with that.
It's a fantastic message. We just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Chris.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always lovely to talk to nice people with nice questions. So thanks for having me, and good luck with it all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.